not a good idea? You really think we should use power tools on the bike? Are you sure? You're sure. All right, it's your idea. What's up, you guys? Forrest here with the FoCo Flow Show. And on this week's video, we're going to be installing a dropper post on Mrs. Flow Show's hardtail. There's just one problem. It's not wired for internal routing, and the dropper post that I bought is an internal dropper post. So we're going to get creative. It's probably not something that I would officially recommend, but if you were ever curious how to do it, we're going to show you how to install a dropper post internally routed for a bike that does not have internal cable rousing. So without further ado, find that flow. Alright guys, full disclaimer and disclosure here, do not follow this video as something I am recommending you should do. I'm just doing this video because we did it for the hardtail that Mrs. Flow Show rides, and therefore we're letting you know that it can be done, although again, I definitely would not recommend this. So if you're unacquainted, we haven't highlighted it a whole lot on the channel, but if you follow me on Instagram, Mrs. Flow Show has her very own hardtail. It's a Kona Fire Mountain that I picked up for $300 a couple of years ago. Mrs. Flow Show doesn't mountain bike a whole lot, but once in a while we get over to Pretty Creek here in Charlottesville, which is awesome for mountain biking, especially for beginners, and then we ride over there sometimes when I want to try to set PRs and things like that as well. The Kona Fire Mountain is perfect. It was a 3x10, but we converted it to a 1x10 wide range with one of my favorite drivetrains, the Advent X. It came with Tektro hydraulic brakes that are perfect and work great to this day. It's got, an air fork, although a pretty basic one. It's got quick release axles, which is good enough for what we need. So it's been our little project bike, but the one thing that was missing was a dropper post. So you've watched this channel before, you've seen the AliExpress video where we picked up a KS Exaform dropper post for like $86. And now that we have it, we've used it in a couple of different bikes. I put one on the fat bike, and now we are putting one on the Fire Mountain. Again, when we looked at the bike, I thought for sure it would be wired internally. Most bikes are nowadays, but this was a 2017, so there was no internal cable housing, and I had ordered the internally routed cable. So if you're not familiar, there's two different ways that dropper posts can be routed and mounted. They all go in. You got to make sure that you measure the diameter of your seat tube, and then if it is externally routed, then the cable runs from the handlebar outside of the entire bike, and then it sits in a little piece on the outside, and that's how it actuates. It never goes inside, but that gets cables all over the place, and they clang and they can get caught on things. They're just not as clean looking. So all of my bikes, all higher end or medium to high end bikes, all are internally routed. And what that means is that the place that the cable actually hooks into the dropper post is at the very bottom of the dropper post, which goes into the frame of the bike. For that to work, you have to have holes that allow you to route a cable housing and or a cable from the dropper lever through the frame of the bike, up the top tube, and then in. I've done a couple of different review videos on some of my favorite dropper posts, and all of them sort of mount and hook and install about the same way, and that's true of the Exaform as well. Again, the one problem that we did not account for was that the Fire Mountain was not internally routed. So what do? Well, in this instance, because we only spent $300 on the bike total, and because it's aluminum framed, not carbon, not titanium, I haven't tested it, I'm sure carbon doesn't work, we figured that we could drill holes in the bike. Again, you go look at your aluminum bike that's internally routed for a dropper, or any of the carbon bikes, and they have a hole up at the front near the top of the top tube. On the side, it routes down, and then it usually exits the frame right at the bottom of the top tube, and then it'll come back up the seat tube, or excuse me, down tube at the bottom of the down tube. Top tube's on across the top of the frame, and then it comes down, and then it comes back. So what do? Is we tried to get an idea how wide the hole needed to be. We found a drill bit, and then we started with the top tube, slowly drilled in till the hole's up, and then we tested it, right? Once we were able to get the cable housing through, we went and looked at the bottom of the bike, tried to figure out the best way for that cable to exit, and then we drilled a hole there, and then we went across to the seat tube at the bottom, and then we drilled another hole from the inside there. Once we had all of that set up, we had the task of running the cable housing through to allow the cable to get through as well. Again, you're going to want to have cable housing, and you're going to make sure that you are able to follow that all the way through to get it to exit successfully the other side of the frame. Now, routing cable wire can be tricky. A very strong magnet is recommended to try to fish the cable wire through, and we use it in this instance to pull the actual housing through, because once you have the entire housing pulled through the frame of the bike, you can pull it all the way, make sure you have enough length to push it up through the top of the seat post. And that's what we did. We were able to then run the cable housing through into the dropper lever, and then run the cable housing down and through, and then back up to the back side of the dropper post. Once you've made those drills, there's some other things that you can do that I didn't do that would allow you to sand down and smooth out the edges and put in a little rubber grommets on each hole to make sure there's no sharp edges. All of that is completely doable to make the entire install look a little bit more aesthetically clean. So here's the problem. Doing this does create some weak points in the frame that otherwise wouldn't be there by the manufacturer. You are 100% voiding the warranty by doing this, and you create some weak points in the frame. So if you're going to ride the bike with any amount of frequency, and if you're sending jumps and drops and riding out in the mountains, do not do this. But if it's for your wife's bike and she's just going to cruise around once in a while, you can absolutely do this. Just inspect the holes, make sure there's no stress fractures or weak points that are starting to formulate. Because once you get all of that done, you pull the dropper post in, you pull the lever tight, you get everything to actuate, and you're good to go. So we're on the trail. Everything's been working fine. There's been no issues, no problems so far. So happy to report a successful install. But again, this is for entertainment purposes only. Do not try this at home, but this is how you could do it if you wanted to. And if you have any questions, of course, comment below. I'll let you know how we did it. And then let me know if you have any other tips and tricks to install this a little bit more successfully. So without further ado, have a great time so we can all get out there and find that flow.